Looking like the cream of wheat man finna try to avoid the pot, but he's still gonna get cooked. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. Federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York have resigned after the Trump Department of Justice ordered them to dismiss corruption charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. CBS News has obtained the resignation letter of Manhattan's top federal prosecutor, who stepped down from her role Wednesday following a directive from the Justice Department to drop the criminal case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. In it, Danielle Sassoon said, quote, "I remain baffled by the rushed and superficial process by which this decision was reached," end quote. She also urged Attorney General Pam Bondi to reconsider the memo that called for the dismissal of Adams' case. On Thursday afternoon, President Trump told reporters in the Oval Office he had not asked for the case against Adams to be dropped. CBS News Justice Department correspondent Scott McFarland joins me now. Scott, 3 top federal prosecutors in New York City have resigned. Their resignations, of course, come after the Justice Department recommended these charges against Adams being dropped. What's going on here, and what more can you tell us about Sassoon's resignation letter?
A dramatic, tumultuous moment inside the Department of Justice, just in the early stages of the new leadership of the U.S. Justice Department. Not only did the top prosecutor in Manhattan resign in protest over this controversial decision to drop the case against Eric Adams, who's pleaded not guilty to corruption charges, she reveals that they were going to bring new charges against Adams, alleging that he had tried to mislead or lie to the FBI during the investigation. And she alleges there was some quid pro quo that was attempted by Adams' defense attorneys, in which they promised to her and her bosses that if they dropped the case, Mayor Adams would help more with Trump's immigration enforcement priorities. She flags that, and it's worth noting in particular, Lindsay, because as part of his order that this case be dropped, Trump's allies at the Department of Justice said they got to drop the case because Eric Adams can help with Trump's immigration enforcement priorities. But there's more. A second and third high-ranking Department of Justice official resigned today also after this case was shifted onto their plates. And that may not be the end of it, Lindsay. There could be more resignations to come. And as the night began here in Washington and in Manhattan, the case still stood against Eric Adams.
Are we hearing anything yet from Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove, the Justice Department, or Adams' lawyers?
Adams' lawyers unequivocally, in a statement to CBS News, deny the allegations of a quid pro quo being offered to this federal prosecutor. It's worth noting the background of this federal prosecutor, Danielle Sassoon, who took over just a few weeks ago during some of the changeover in federal prosecutor offices nationwide. It was a temp job for her. She once clerked for Antonin Scalia, arguably the most conservative justice of our lifetimes. She has, in her resignation letter, cited her background and her credentials when she made the argument that this was a rushed process and it was not merited, that Eric Adams' case should not be dropped. But, Lindsay, that's not the first word of protest we've heard about this. The Department of Justice's rationale for dropping this case wasn't that the facts changed or that there was a lack of confidence in his guilt. It was that it's a distraction against the mayor at a time when there's a primary coming up for New York City's mayor in the summer, and in which he could be there helping Donald Trump's priorities on immigration. That's the quid pro quo that was alleged today by Danielle Sassoon.
Every day is a busy day in Washington, but particularly today you're following multiple beats, and we have reporting of mass layoffs at the Department of Education. What do you know about that and any other agencies that could be impacted?
It's going to be more agencies in which this happens, but in the Department of Education, there's efforts to terminate employees who are newer to the job. The phrase they use here in Washington, Lindsay, is probationary employees, somebody who's had less experience and has less of a civil service protection, easier to move out. It begins at the Department of Education, an agency Trump wants to get rid of altogether. It's going to move to other agencies. And to tie this all together, Lindsay, there's a concern inside the FBI that their probationary employees will be cut as well. As many as 1,000 could be among those trimmed as part of a system-wide effort to cut newer employees to make it simpler for Trump to get rid of large numbers of federal employees. It starts at the Department of Education, but it does not end there, Lindsay.
Of course, Wednesday night, we saw a judge say that President Trump's fork in the road directive, those deferred buyouts could continue, and the administration shortly after that saying doors closed, no more buyouts would be offered. Scott McFarland, thank you. Later this hour, we're going to talk to a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General about Thursday's resignation of Manhattan's top federal prosecutor.
Now, according to reports, Daniel R. Sassoon, the acting U.S. attorney from the Southern District of New York, and 6 of her associates announced their resignation to people on Thursday. And Daniel Sassoon decided to resign from the U.S. Attorney's Office rather than follow an order from the Department of Justice to drop charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams as related to his alleged case of bribery and corruption. And the reason why the acting U.S. Attorney General has decided to resign her position on the record is because she basically believes that the whole request to have the charges dropped against Eric Adams justified by the acting U.S. Deputy Attorney General for him to tackle his ability to tackle illegal immigration and violent crime are not really valid, and believes that there's a possible larger case of corruption based on evidence that was presented that Eric Adams allegedly destroyed evidence and instructed others to destroy evidence as related to providing false information to the FBI. And these charges basically are ones that the U.S. Attorney believes have some merit, and because they believe that these charges have some merit, this is why the acting U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York is deciding to resign her position, and her associates are deciding to resign their positions because they believe that the request to drop the charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams is completely unethical and is a possible case of quid pro quo, where Eric Adams is looking to provide a favor to Donald Trump and has used the favor he has curried ever since Donald Trump won the election to go out here and get these charges dropped in exchange for going out here and enforcing the immigration policies in New York. Now, when it comes to this whole situation, on the surface, it's looking like the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York is resigning because she believes that there is an ethics issue as related to the request to drop these charges. But what's happening behind the scenes is that you have the system of white supremacy basically having an ethical crisis as related to Eric Adams. Now, Eric Adams was charged by the U.S. attorney from the Biden administration, and that U.S. attorney basically was in the middle of an investigation that had gone on during the first Trump presidency. This went on not the first Trump presidency, but the Obama administration. They had been doing an investigation on Eric Adams since 2014 and had been compiling evidence ever since 2014 as related to their investigation. And this is where they basically started to compound their case as Eric Adams was dealing with a migrant crisis that he instigated here in New York. Now, Eric Adams, when he was mayor of New York, instigated a migrant crisis by going out here and inviting migrants into New York in an effort to go out here and spite Governor Greg Abbott. And as he looked to spite Governor Greg Abbott, he basically was seen shaking hands with migrants. Unfortunately, as New York's resources got overwhelmed, Eric Adams basically thought he could basically continue on with things because he had a covert contract believing that Joe Biden would provide him with funding to take care of these migrants in his quest to go out here and virtue signal. Unfortunately, none of that money was ever going to come because in 2022, Republicans had taken control of the House, and as they have taken control of the House, they were going to make sure that no funding was going to be sent to states to take care of migrants, and that left Eric Adams in a pickle where he made a video talking about how the migrant crisis would destroy New York City, and basically turned on his party and made harsh criticisms of Joe Biden as he was dealing with a fiscal crisis from trying to take care of just 33,000 migrants when Greg Abbott himself had to deal with 3 million migrants. And he basically was tapping out and crying uncle as related to the city winding up overwhelmed. And this is where he started making criticisms of Joe Biden as related to not being able to get that funding. But what was going on behind the scenes with Eric Adams was he was showing that how naive he was regarding the politics transpiring in front of him, because when it comes to a mayor, he has to understand that, again, when you go out here and have a budget, you have to maintain a budget, and you cannot go out here believing that you're going to get federal funding that quickly, because federal funding sometimes takes years and even decades to go through Congress. And the whole covert contract that Eric Adams had was something he thought he could virtue signal to Joe Biden in order to get a job in his cabinet for the 2024 campaign. But everything wound up falling apart as he had to deal with a fiscal crisis he could not manage here in New York. And this is where he started making criticisms of the Biden administration as the investigation was further going on as related to these charges of bribery and corruption. Now, as things were going on as related to this case and it was escalating around him, Eric Adams wanted to believe that it was Joe Biden who basically instigated things. No, the whole investigation into Eric Adams was going on as far back as 2014 and ramping up as far back as 2021, because I remember reading a New York Times article which talked about how people were looking at Eric Adams and basically questioning him, and again questioning him because they did not really see the cream of wheat man fitting into their business and not fitting into their business. And sadly, Eric Adams, basically not looking at the subtle politics transpiring around him, could not see the big picture as related to white supremacy. And because he couldn't see the big picture of white supremacy, because he was caught up in his feelings about being the second black mayor, this bootlick basically was looking to go out here and pander to many of these rich whites and non-blacks, believing he was going to get favor with them, not seeing how many of these whites and non-blacks were secretly plotting against him, because in the system of white supremacy, they really don't want to see a black man have any power. And those bootlicks, basically, when they come up to the positions of power, they're already making a plan to basically present one of Professor Black Truth's axioms, in that bootlick is a job without a retirement plan. And they were basically making plans to show him the door far back as 2021 when he won that election. But Eric Adams, again, because he was caught up in his feelings, could not really see the subtle politics transpiring around him as related to the political chess game that was going on. And sadly, this pawn on the board was holding up Candyland cards, thinking he was going to be able to be a rising member of the Blue Party, calling himself the Biden of Brooklyn. And as he called himself the Biden of Brooklyn, he basically thought he could go out here and clout chase with things like the vaccine mandate that he basically enforced on New York when the whole world had stopped enforcing this vaccine mandate, keeping many black New Yorkers from working. And he went on to go on and again look to go out here and continue maintaining the policies of Blue Party white candidates like Kathy Hochul and Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio, such as the sanctuary city laws, and again went along with these sanctuary city laws. They were good for him during the time of the migrant crisis. However, he wanted to speak against them when he saw that he could not get any sort of clout with Joe Biden, who only talked to him once as related to things in his term, and saw that he could not get any favor. So when this bootlick saw he could not get any favor or funding from the Biden administration, he basically wanted to start to harshly criticize it after this officer who was hired to, again, be the mayor who would be tough on crime after failed policies from people who he was supporting, like Bill de Blasio and Andrew Cuomo, such as bail reform or complete failures, turning the city into a crime-ridden cesspool. And that was exacerbated by policies that the cream of wheat man went out here and supported, from looking to support the whole sanctuary city policy, a sanctuary city policy that turned New York City into an insane asylum, when he saw that these policies that he looked to support as related to not only, again, the migrant crisis, but the whole Bill de Blasio's policies such as sanctuary cities and bail reform from Andrew Cuomo. Again, this bootlick basically was looking to toe the party line, but the party line was basically hurting the quality of life for New Yorkers, and that's when he wanted to go out here and do an about face, because he saw that going out here and copying other people was not going to benefit him. And when he saw that copying other people wasn't going to benefit him, this is where he made his criticisms of the Biden administration, and again did it in a cowardly fashion, because he said that the migrant crisis would destroy New York City. But Eric Adams was destroying New York City by following the policies of members of the Blue Party and not having any sort of policies of his own. And because the spineless bootlick had no policies of his own, this is why New York City basically has fallen completely apart. And as it's fallen completely apart, the investigation was going on as related to him making all sorts of deals behind the scenes. And again, as he was making these deals, evidence was basically piling up. But what Eric Adams wants us to believe is that this is a whole case being motivated by his criticism of the Blue Party and the Biden administration, even though this case was going on even before Joe Biden came to office. It was going on when Barack Obama was president, and now that we have Donald Trump as president for a second term, Eric Adams basically wants to try to make us believe that there is a case being made against him from the left side of the party. But what we have here with these attorneys, U.S. attorneys, are that they were appointed by Donald Trump, because the previous U.S. attorney, a black man who was foreign born, basically wound up leaving because the Biden's term had ended, and once Biden's term had ended, he basically left his position. That left Eric Adams' case in limbo. However, the acting U.S. Attorney General was not Attorney General, but U.S. Attorney was appointed by Donald Trump, and this U.S. Attorney is seeing a case against Eric Adams, according to reports. However, what I'm really seeing with this decision to resign is that white supremacy is in a bit of a pickle with the cream of wheat man. They are in a bit of a pickle with the cream of wheat man, because again, the axiom that Professor Black Truth has presented is that white supremacy always breaks its tools, and with white supremacy already breaking this tool, Eric Adams is hoping to be fixed by Donald Trump. And that's one of the things that's not going to be an optical good look for many of these white supremacists out here, like many of the people who supported Donald Trump in the 2024 election. Now, when it comes to a lot of these folks who are the base of Donald Trump's whole platform, they're not too happy about Eric Adams going out here and receiving something that only white men go out here and receive in the system of white supremacy. Now, like Professor Black Truth has talked about in many of his videos, white supremacy is a system of goodies, giveaways, and most importantly, guarantees. And the whole idea of a black man getting some of those goodies, giveaways, and guarantees, that's upsetting the entire base as related to Donald Trump. And that's where these white folks basically are gonna get upset, because the whole idea of Eric Adams being someone who is out here with possible evidence that's already against him, getting one of these goodies, giveaways, or guarantees, that's something that's irking the base of people like those people who were basically pardoned for January 6th, or recently Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon, the former head of the WWE, he got all the charges dropped as related to his case, and not a word was said. And not a word was said because, one, Donald Trump was white and he said so, and two, he had given this privilege to a white man. And the whole idea of a black man receiving this same privilege that white men receive, this is something that, again, irks the base of Trump supporters, because they wanted that privilege reserved for themselves. And again, white supremacy is very, very sensitive about these kinds of things, hypersensitive at that. And as they are hypersensitive, they really don't like the idea of a guy like Eric Adams going out here and receiving a quid pro quo deal that they go out here and benefit from themselves. No, they don't like this at all, even though it appears to be unfair. It's just not fair, not just because Eric Adams is again allegedly flouting the rules of the government, which he really, again, yeah, that's what they're trying to do. But what the white supremacist doesn't like, is that you've got a white man telling other white people that a black man should receive the same benefits of white people, and that's again rubbing the base of Trump supporters the wrong way. Now, to look at this whole case objectively, again, what's happening here is, again, they wanted to have the charges dropped for Eric Adams to basically be their bootlick, because in the game of white supremacy, it is a chess game. And again, they wanted this done so that Eric Adams could run in the 2025 mayor's race, so that he could be a part of the election. And that's when the white supremacy wanted to again pull the punchline of the joke and again yank the rug out from Eric Adams. But the whole thing is that when it comes to many of these white supremacists, they want the cream of wheat man cooked, and they want the cream of wheat man cooked because, again, under the unwritten rules of white supremacy, no black person should be given the same privileges that a white man should have, and no black man should be going out here and believing that they have the same rights to the same privileges that white supremacists have as related to their unwritten social rules of being provided with goodies, giveaways, and guarantees. And that's where this whole situation with Eric Adams is, where the cream of wheat man is thinking he can evade the pot, but he can't evade the pot. When it comes to white supremacy, they already made a plan to cook this bootlick. They made a plan to cook this bootlick on both the red and blue side. Now, people, when they get in their emotions, they think it's just the blue side looking to cook him. No, the U.S. attorney, who was a black man on that side, they may have, again, been the one who set up the case, but that case was going on in the Obama years, again with the first black bootlick president, and again was established by Joe Biden's U.S. Attorney's Office. But the case was going to go on because they have evidence against him as related to their alleged case, but they also have a whole situation where they had a bootlick who basically they believed was getting too big for his britches. And if Trump, well, here and again, insisted that this charge is being dropped, this is where white supremacy has a problem with the case. And this is where the U.S. attorney, acting U.S. attorney, resigned, because what's happening here is that the system of white supremacy does not want to give Eric Adams those goodies, giveaways, and guarantees that would lead to this case going away the way it did for Vince McMahon or the January 6th individuals, because to give Eric Adams that privilege is something that would again alienate the base. and alienate the base because it would optically look bad, and it would also go out here and really upset many of these white supremacists because they want their system of white supremacy to remain in place where they can get the quid pro quo, they can go out here and get the favors, they can go out here and get the advantage, and they don't want a black man to have that power, and they don't want a black man to have that power because they believe that this bootlick would be too dangerous to the system of white supremacy, too dangerous to the system of white supremacy, because when it comes to Eric Adams, if he were to receive these privileges of these guarantees that would lead to him getting this case, or President Trump giving him a pardon, this would make this black man a danger to the system of white supremacy, because this is a dude in the system of white supremacy who would be considered too big for his draws, and again, too big for his draws because, again, they like their bootlicks to be under the white supremacists, not on the same level of the white supremacists, and this would lead to Eric Adams, who again talks a lot of jive and goes out here and thinks that he can finesse himself into situations, finessing himself into a situation where he's basically again going to be in a worse situation than he would as related to the three fates of black bootlicks. Now, when it comes to black bootlicks, there usually are three fates that befall them where they end their careers in an ignominious fashion. One, they basically could just wind up getting voted out of office, like Lori Lightfoot or Eric Adams' predecessor, David Dinkins, after being saddled with a tarnished record, which is what happened to Eric Adams after taking the mayor's office after Bill de Blasio, an incompetent white man. Two, they usually wind up getting federal indictments against them for corruption, which has happened to many mayors like Detroit's Kwame Kilpatrick. Or three, if they just go too far and try to touch the sun like Eric Adams is trying to do with the system of white supremacy. This is where the cream of wheat man gets possibly cooked, and possibly cooked in a way that leads to him winding up, sadly, like many of those who were late, like Dr. King or Malcolm X. Again, the system of white supremacy, again, has several fates that befall an individual like Eric Adams, and that's why Eric Adams is basically so sick these days as related to his health, because he knows that he basically jive-talked himself into a situation not as related to politics but with the system of white supremacy. And I want you to understand there's a big difference between the political system and the system of white supremacy. The political system is what is on the surface as related to the subtle politics transpiring around us, but the system of white supremacy is one where they have these written and unwritten social rules, and Eric Adams basically went out here and violated a lot of those rules as he went out here looking to get another job, and as he's bootlicked and pandered and jived his way into trying to get Donald Trump's favor, he's basically put himself in a dire situation, where the acting U.S. Attorney General, a white woman, would rather resign her position because she knows about the unwritten social rules of white supremacy. This woman and her associates know about the unwritten social rules of white supremacy, and they know that, again, this whole case is radioactive. If they drop these charges, they know they would wind up losing in the system of white supremacy if they drop these charges. And these were people, again, appointed by Donald Trump, and they know the danger of, again, violating the rules of the system of white supremacy, and that's why they wound up leaving their positions. Because they didn't want to get in that jam, because they didn't want to lose their positions. They didn't want to lose their position in the system of white supremacy and lose their goodies, giveaways, and guarantees by going out here and violating that rule. No, they didn't want to be marked for a just total annihilation in the system of white supremacy, and this is why people are again trying to avoid dealing with this case. And basically the best thing they wanted to do was see this case go through the courts, and go through the courts because again the system of white supremacy basically had the cream of wheat man cooked, and he's basically cooked at this point because again the Trump presidency is making a collision course with white supremacy, and a collision course against white supremacy if they go out here and again look to get Eric Adams out of this jam, because when it comes to the system of white supremacy, they're not about going out here and putting the black man in the same position as them, where he's getting the benefits of those goodies, giveaways, and guarantees. And that's where this could optically blow up in Donald Trump's face, because that base of Trump supporters, like the January 6th individuals, an individual who possibly, again, took the life of a cop who took the life of a black man, there's a whole group of people who, again, voted to get those goodies, giveaways, and guarantees, and they're not too happy about seeing Eric Adams go out here and basically go out here and be able to walk away from these charges, because to them, him walking away from those charges is basically the Trump presidency walking away from white supremacy. Now, if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find those books on Amazon.com, and if you want to drop a donation, you can drop a donation by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today.
Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA from the Black Boule in this action-packed all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.